The film opens with Iris, a grieving mother who has lost her will to live after the death of her son Mateo. He fell from a cliff during a hike under her supposed care. Racked with guilt, Iris decides to end her life. In a haunting scene, she walks into her kitchen, picks up a knife, and leaves her phone behind. She drives to the very mountain where the tragedy occurred, intending to jump from its peak. Just as she's about to make her final decision, a stranger named Richard appears. He speaks a few simple but profound words. Broken doesn't mean hopeless.
Broken doesn't have to mean hopeless.
With those words, Iris hesitates. For the first time in a long while, she feels a spark of hope and decides against taking her life. As she and Richard walk back to their parked cars, a brief moment of connection unfolds. However, as Iris tries to maneuver into her car, parked in a tight spot, Richard retrieves an umbrella-shaped taser. When Iris jokingly asks, "Expecting rain?" he smirks and replies, "You can never be too prepared." Before she can react, he tases her until she collapses. Iris wakes up in terror, her hands and legs bound in the back of Richard's car. Panicking, she discovers a small knife hidden in her pocket. Using her wit, she distracts Richard with conversation, giving herself time to cut her bindings. In a desperate moment, she attacks him, causing the car to veer off the road and crash into a tree. What follows is a brutal and visceral fight for survival. Iris uses the car's seatbelt to strangle Richard, but he adjusts the seat to break her grip. Both exhausted, they tumble out of the car and into the forest. Iris frees her legs and screams for help, but Richard taunts her, saying no one will hear her cries. Richard reveals a horrifying twist. He has injected her with a sedative. In 20 minutes, her body will shut down completely, leaving her paralyzed.
Body is going to shut down soon.
As her limbs begin to weaken, Iris fights back the panic. She flees into the woods, her mind flashing back to memories of her son, Mateo. As the sedative takes hold, her body begins to betray her. She struggles to count her fingers, losing coordination. Setting a timer on her watch for 10 minutes, she limps through the forest, desperate to escape. Hiding beneath a tree, she struggles to stay silent as Richard searches nearby, but nature betrays her. A swarm of ants crawls onto her face, one even entering her nose, forcing her to gasp. Richard hears the sound and closes in. In a last-ditch effort, Iris crawls toward a nearby river and throws herself into the water, just as Richard reaches for her. Floating down the river, battered by waves and obstacles, Iris clings to a log and makes it to the shore. Collapsing on the ground, paralyzed and gasping for air, she lies helpless. Her watch beeps as the timer runs out, signaling that the sedative has taken full effect. Only her eyes can move, wide with terror. Don't Move is a harrowing tale of grief, survival, and the monstrous ways trauma can manifest. It's a chilling exploration of human resilience and the darkness that can arise from pain. As Iris lies paralyzed on the ground, her body frozen but her mind racing, an old man named Bill drives his tractor across the field, grazing his cattle. He nearly runs over her before noticing her motionless form. Alarmed, Bill hurries over and tries to ask her questions, but quickly realizes she can't speak or move. Only her eyes seem responsive. Through trial and error, Bill discovers Iris can communicate by blinking. One blink for yes, two blinks for no. Realizing she needs immediate help, Bill carries her back to his farmhouse, promising to call the police. Just as Bill picks up the phone, a loud bang echoes from the front door. Startled, he looks toward Iris, who frantically blinks twice, signaling no, don't open it. Hesitant, Bill goes to the door and finds a man, Richard, standing there, his face bloodied and disheveled. Richard claims he was in a car accident and is searching for his wife. Bill, cautious but sympathetic, offers to call for help, but firmly tells Richard to stay outside. Ignoring the warning, Richard steps into the house uninvited, muttering that he feels unwell. Bill grows suspicious as Richard begins to glance around the house. Tension mounts when Richard notices a wheelbarrow by the wall and sits down, casually eyeing his surroundings. Bill warns Richard to leave, threatening to call 911. Sensing the situation slipping from his control, Richard bursts into crocodile tears, weaving a sob story about his catatonic wife, who has episodes where she freezes, refusing to talk or move. He plays on Bill's sympathy, spinning an elaborate lie about his desperate search for her. Bill starts to question Richard's story when his phone unexpectedly rings. Suspicious, Bill says, "I thought you lost your phone?" Richard quickly backtracks, claiming he forgot he had it. Realizing he's being lied to, Bill refuses to divulge any information and demands Richard leave. The atmosphere snaps into violence when Richard refuses to go, demanding to know where she is. Bill stands his ground, stating he's hidden her somewhere safe. A heated confrontation escalates into a physical fight. Though Bill initially gains the upper hand, Richard grabs a sharp tool and stabs Bill in the leg, incapacitating him. With a final brutal blow, Richard kills Bill. Iris, still lying paralyzed behind the couch, helplessly taps her fingers against the floor in a desperate attempt to make herself known. Richard, oblivious to her presence, drags a fuel canister from the back of the house. He pours gasoline everywhere and sets the farmhouse ablaze, intending to destroy all evidence. Satisfied with his work, Richard heads to Bill's truck to make his escape, but when the engine refuses to start, frustration sets in. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he notices the rope of a nearby window tilting, just enough to catch his attention. Realizing Iris is still inside, he storms back into the burning house. Richard finds Iris and, with a grim expression, carries her out of the flames and places her in the truck. He mutters to himself, furious that she's made his escape more complicated, leaving behind a burning inferno. Richard finally manages to get the truck started and drives away, taking Iris with him. As the truck rumbles down the road, Richard's phone rings again. Annoyed, he answers with a gruff, "What?" On the other end of the line is his young daughter, her voice bright and cheerful. She excitedly announces that she got her report card, straight A's and 1B. Richard, still tense from the ordeal, forces a congratulatory tone. She continues saying, "Mom says we can celebrate tomorrow." Then, she drops another bombshell. "We're coming up to the cabin to see you." Richard's expression darkens as he realizes his plans are about to be disrupted. Desperation flashes in his eyes as he tries to regain control of the situation. He demands to speak to his wife, but his daughter insists they'll see him tomorrow at 10 a.m. Unable to refuse, he reluctantly agrees, masking his frustration with a strained smile. The phone call ends, leaving Richard visibly agitated. He glances at Iris, who remains slumped in the passenger seat, unable to move or speak, but clearly processing everything. Richard leans closer to her, pinching her arm sharply to test her reaction. She doesn't cry out, but her face contorts slightly in pain. Satisfied that she still can't fight back, Richard mutters under his breath, realizing the gas tank is nearly empty. Richard pulls into a dimly lit gas station. As he steps out to fill the tank, Iris, still paralyzed but beginning to regain slight movement, scans her surroundings, breathing heavily. She notices a family stepping out of their car nearby. Summoning every ounce of her willpower, she releases her seatbelt, hoping to attract attention. A young boy wanders too close to the truck and locks eyes with Iris. Her desperate expression silently pleads for help. She tries to mouth the word, "help," but the boy's mother quickly grabs him, scolding him for approaching strangers. Iris's hope crumbles as the family walks away, oblivious to her plight. Richard returns, noticing the unfastened seatbelt. With a cold smile, he leans in, tightens the belt around Iris again and mutters, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." He drives back to the site of his earlier car accident. Parking next to his wrecked vehicle, he retrieves tools from the truck to attach a tow cable. As he works, the flashing lights of a police car illuminate the scene. Richard stiffens as an officer approaches, his hand resting on his gun holster. The officer, noticing the damage to the car and Richard's suspicious demeanor, begins asking pointed questions. Richard feigns calm, spinning a half-hearted story about the crash. Meanwhile, Iris, from the truck, musters her strength to slightly roll down the window. When the officer draws near, she whispers, "Help!" The officer, alarmed by the faint plea, turns to Iris. Before he can react, Richard grabs a heavy jackpipe and strikes him across the head. The officer collapses, but Richard doesn't stop, hitting him repeatedly until he's lifeless. Richard drags the officer's body into the wrecked car, douses it with gasoline, and sets it ablaze. The fire engulfs the vehicle, erasing all evidence as Iris watches in silent horror. Back on the road, Iris tries a different approach. Her voice, though weak, trembles as she pleads with Richard to let her go. She uses his own words against him, reminding him that broken doesn't mean hopeless. But instead of swaying him, her words ignite his rage. "Don't twist my words," he shouts, slamming the steering wheel. His anger boils over, and he suddenly changes direction, driving toward a secluded area deep in the woods. When they reach a blocked dirt road, Richard decides to proceed on foot. Dragging Iris from the truck, he retrieves a syringe from the car, but as he prepares to use it, Iris surprises him. She grabs the syringe and attempts to inject him. However, her weakened grip fails, and Richard snatches it back, hurling it into the woods. Frustrated, Richard pulls a knife from his back pocket and forces Iris into a small boat tied to the riverbank. As they drift into the dark, misty waters, Richard's demeanor shifts. His face softens momentarily when Iris, through tears, asks for a favor. "Please, Mateo's boat. It's in my pocket," she whispers, referring to a toy boat belonging to her late son. Moved by her request, or perhaps by his own twisted sense of pity, Richard leans in to search her pocket. The moment he does, Iris seizes the opportunity. With trembling hands, she snatches the knife from his back pocket and drives it into his throat. Richard staggers back, blood pouring from the wound, but he doesn't go down easily. He rips the knife from his neck, his movements erratic. Pulling a gun from his waistband, He aims shakily at Iris, but Richard's unstable footing sends him toppling into the river. Iris lunges for the gun, managing to grab it as Richard climbs back onto the boat, drenched and furious. In a frantic struggle, Iris fires several shots, one striking him in the stomach. Richard collapses into the water, sinking into the dark depths below. For a brief moment, Iris allows herself to smile, her chest heaving with relief, but her relief is short-lived as she notices water pouring into the boat. The vessel begins to sink rapidly. As the boat disappears beneath the surface, Iris fights the urge to give in. She struggles against the pull of the water, finally breaking free and swimming to the riverbank. Crawling onto solid ground, she collapses, counting her fingers to ensure her body is regaining full function. From the distance, a raspy, guttural sound cuts through the silence. She freezes, turning to see Richard sprawled on the shore, bloodied but alive, his breath shallow. Iris stares at him, her expression unreadable. She approaches him slowly, her legs still weak but steady enough. Standing over his broken form, she whispers, "Thank you." Without another word, she turns and walks away, leaving him to his inevitable demise. For the first time, Iris feels a sense of control, a glimmer of freedom in the chaos she endured. As the sun begins to rise, painting the horizon in hues of orange and gold, Iris disappears into the distance, her silhouette a symbol of survival and newfound strength. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories. Thank you for watching.